Children, in this video we continue with chapter 3, our changing earth, the third part of a geography lesson for standard 7th. Children, in the second part of my video on our changing earth, we had learnt that the earth's crust is broken up into a number of plates called lithospheric plates or tectonic plates. Okay, and the movement of these plates cause changes on the surface of the earth, and these are endogenic forces which act in the interior of the earth, and like earthquakes and volcanoes, and we have seen how much damage they do and bring about changes on the surface of the earth. In this video we are going to learn about exogenic forces which act on the surface of the earth. And which are these? They are weathering, erosion and deposition. And what are the agents of weathering, erosion and deposition? It is river, wind, sea waves and glaciers. Children, the earth's landscape is being continuously worn away by the process of weathering and erosion. Now what is weathering? Okay, weathering is the breaking up of the rocks on the earth's surface, and erosion, it is the wearing away of the landscape by different agents like water, wind and ice. Now the eroded material is carried away and it has to be deposited somewhere. And how is it? It is eroded and carried away and transported by water, wind, and it is deposited somewhere. This process of erosion and deposition creates different landforms on the surface of the earth. Children, now let us see how the river erodes the landscape of the earth. Okay, now let us look into the work of a river. Now if you have to define a river, what is a river? It is a body of flowing water, continuously flowing. And the place where the river begins, it is called the source, and the place where the river ends and meets the sea, it is called the mouth of the river. And the journey of the river can be divided into three parts. It is the upper course, middle course and lower course. Let's learn about the journey of the river in the next slide. Children, now let me tell you about the journey of the river. Okay, now where does the river start? It starts from the mountains. The ice on the mountains melts and the river flows down. So where it starts, it is the source. The source of the river is in the mountain and it is flowing downwards. Okay, so when it flows downwards, this part is called the upper course of the river, and this is the youthful stage of the river. It is very agile, full of energy, and the water is gushing down. And always you know that water moves from highland to lowland. So you can see the water gushing down, and on its way it creates landforms. We'll look into the landforms in our next slide. Okay, so this is called the youthful stage of the river. When it is beginning, it starts from the mountains and begins to flow down to end into the sea. Okay, so this first part is called the upper course of the river. Then as it moves down, the river goes into the middle course. It means it is the middle age. Here the river becomes wider and it slows down because it's carrying a lot of sediments. Okay, and then finally when it is about to reach the sea and meet the sea and empty out the water into the sea, it is called the lower course of the river. And here the river moves very slowly, and it is called the old age of the river, where because it is full of sediments, it moves very slowly and empties out into the sea. Okay, so we have studied the journey of the river from the source, and where it ends, it is called the mouth of the river. Okay, and we can describe the river regarding it into three parts, three stages, which are the upper course, which is the youthful stage, the middle course, which is the middle age stage, and the lower course, which is the old age stage of the river. Now we look into the various landforms that are formed in each of the course of the river. So children, as I told you what happens in the upper course, you can see the upper course, the river flows through the mountains regions, the volume of water is not much but the slope is steep, so the water flows swiftly and its erosion is maximum, okay, and the upper course erosion is maximum, most erosion takes place here. In the middle course, the river enters the plains and the slope is gentle and the water flows down slowly. There is more transportation of material. So here there is more erosion and deposition taking place here. Now, in the lower course, the river is flow is very slow. It is reaching the old age. The slope is flat and the river is full of sediments. And the main work here is deposition. So we see in the upper course what is happening, more erosion is happening. In the middle course both deposition and erosion is taking place, but in the lower course we see only deposition happening. So children, you must remember this. In the upper course it is erosion. Why it is erosion? Because the water is gushing down the slope of the mountains and in its course it is eroding the mountains, okay. Middle course, because it has entered the plains, it slows down, so it is more of deposition and as well as erosion is taking place. And in the lower course, since the river is full of sediments, what takes place? Deposition takes place. So children, let us see what kind of landforms takes place when the river flows down from the mountain, that is from the source of the river to the mouth of the river. So, and we have divided the river into three parts: the upper course, middle course and lower course. Now in the upper course, what do we see? We see formation of steep valleys and we also see waterfalls and rapids. In the middle course, when the river has entered the plain, we see the formation of the river is meandering, okay, we'll learn about these formations. And in the lower course we see the formation of oxbow lakes, flood plains, levees and deltas. So we are going to learn all these in detail in our next slide. Children, this is a diagram of a river's journey from the source to the mouth. So you can see the river at the mountains, it is starting, that is the source. The ice is melted from the mountains and the river gushes down. And when it is gushes down, what happens here leads to V-shaped valleys, waterfalls takes place. And when this river gushes down, in the middle, as it joins in the middle course, you can see tributaries joining the main river, okay. And then the river starts to meander, it starts to bend and curve, okay. And when it enters the lower course, we see formations like oxbow lakes, levees, deltas, distributaries or channels, estuaries, okay. And finally it meets the sea, which is the end of the journey of the river, which is called the mouth of the river. Children, we look into the formation of waterfall in the upper course of the river, okay. In the upper course we see the formation of waterfalls. Now what is a waterfall? It is when a river tumbles at a steep angle over very hard rocks down a valley side, it forms a waterfall. So you can see when it is layered over one part of a hard rock, then underneath is a soft rock. When the river tumbles and with constant erosion, it carves out like a step of the soft rock, okay. And then the water falls like in a punch pool. This is a punch pool develops here, and very soon this hard rock which is projecting out, this also cracks and falls down. When this falls down, then the waterfall retreats, it goes back a little, okay, because this has fallen down. So this is the formation of waterfall which we see on the upper course of the river. So you see children, here is a picture of a waterfall, okay, and you can see how it is tumbling down the, and what has it created? The sides it has carved down, it's created steep sides which is called a gorge pool, and where it is falling, that area is called as a plunge pool, or the water is falling there, okay. So this is the waterfall. fall. Children, as the river enters the plain, it tends to twist and bend. Okay, and why does the river then twist and bend? Because now it is carrying sediments and it has to find its way somehow. So it will find its own path, and normally at this stage the river twists and bends. So this twisting and bending is called meander. So we say in the middle stage or middle course of the river tends to meander. And what is meander? These are the twists and turns of the river into large bends. You can see the large bends here. This is called meander. So we see the formation of meandering in the middle stage of the river. Now in the lower course of the river, the another formation which takes place is the formation of an oxbow lake. Now let us know what is oxbow lake. How is this formed? So due to the continuous erosion and depositions on the side of the meanders, can you see here the red part as the erosion and then deposition taking place? What happens? Okay, the sides of the meander loop then comes closer and closer. It's coming closer and closer. Okay, and in due course of time the meander loop cuts off from the river to form a cut-off lake. It is also called as a cut-off lake or oxbow lake. Okay, so when these loops come closer together, then finally in a period of time it gets cut off from the main river. This is the main river, and what is formed here? A cut-off lake. It is also called an oxbow lake. Why is it called an oxbow lake? Because the ends of these lake, it looks like the horns of an ox. That's why the name is given as oxbow lake. Now let us look into the video, an animated video showing the formation of oxbow lake. Of the river, we see another formation which is called as flood plains. So you can see in this picture, this is a river and the two sides of the river are called the banks of the river. So when the river overflows, it deposits all the sediments on the sides of its banks. Okay, and when the river is in flood, it floods the nearby areas, you can see, and deposit all the fine sand and silt and sediment that it brings down from the mountains and deposits it here. And this soil that it deposits here is very rich in alluvium, which is very good for agriculture. So what is floodplains? It's mainly the flat land next to the river, which the river deposits alluvial soil or sediments, clay, whatever it brings down from the mountains. So children, you see this is the river. You can see the blue area is the river which is flowing, and its bank it is deposited sediments, and it is a raised kind of a mountain kind of a thing. This raised kind of a thing is called as a levee. And when the river is in flood, it brings in lots and lots of sediments. It deposits over a large area of flat land, and which becomes very fertile and good for agriculture. This entire thing will call as a flood plains. But the sides of the bank which is raised by deposits, it is called a levee. And what kind of deposition takes place? It's called alluvial deposits, which is very, very good for agriculture. So that is why this area is one of the most fertile area of the river, and that is why you see in our northern plains this flood plains have been formed, which is very good for agriculture. Now as the river reaches the mouth or is about to empty into the sea or ocean, another formation is formed which is called as delta. Now what is delta? When the river approaches the sea, it is carrying a lot of sediments along with it. It's loaded with sediment and it really chokes here. It cannot flow into the sea. So what happens? A finger-like projections takes place. The river splits up into finger-like projections, and these are called as distributaries or channels. And channels are formed, and in between those channels, deposits takes place. A layer of sediments are here. These are called as delta. Okay, and these channels that are called, they are called as distributaries. So when the river, before emptying out into the sea, we have another formation which is called as a delta. Children, now let us look into the work of sea waves and see how sea waves bring about the formation of different landforms, especially in the coastal areas. So due to the erosion and depositions of sea waves give rise to a number of coastal landforms. Let's look into it. Children, the sea waves create a number of landforms in the coastal areas. Okay, so let's see which are the landforms. You can see the formation of caves, the arches, the stack, the stump, the headlines, bay and beach. And now let us look into the erosional activities and what are the landforms formed with the erosional activity of the sea waves. Now the continuously striking of the sea waves on the rocks, what happens? It weakens the rocks, cracks develop, and these cracks get wider and wider, leading into a hollow cave. Okay, you can see the cave formation is formed, and when this continuous striking goes on and on, you can see through the cave and only the roof of the cave remains. That is called as a sea arch. Now when the roof again also collapses, then it forms a stack. Okay, and when the stack with repeated continuous striking of the waves, it gets shorter and shorter and forms stump. And even the sea waves wants to get into the land, so it erodes all the rocks there, especially the soft rocks, and gets into the land. When it gets into the land, it is called bay. And then these are all erosional activities. Okay, and within the sea is going into the land, it is also depositing a lot of sand and silt. So when a lot of deposition takes place here, we form a beach is formed. So beach is a depositional activity of the sea waves. Okay, rest we see are all erosional activities. Another formation which takes place due to the sea waves is cliff. You can see a cliff formed here. Everything is cut off. This is the cliff, and when it erodes and only a step like thing remains, this is called as a wave cut platform. A platform kind of a thing is formed. So these are the erosional activities of the sea waves, and so we see different kinds of landforms being formed with the process of erosion and deposition. Now let us recap all the land formations that are formed due to the sea waves. Now the sea waves continuously strike at the rocks, okay, and due to this cracks develop. Over time they become larger and form hollow caves called sea caves. Okay, as the cavities become bigger, only the roof of the cave remains, forming sea arches. With further erosion, what happens is a wall-like feature is formed. So the roof breaks down of the sea arch and it forms a wall-like feature which is called as a stack. And with further erosion of the stack, only a small portion of the rock remains, which is called as a stump. Now due to the sea waves, we also see the formation of sea cliff. Now what is a sea cliff? They are steep rocky coast rising almost vertically over the sea water. It is called as a sea cliff. And one important depositional activity of the sea waves is the forming of beaches. Now beaches are formed when the sea waves deposit sediments along the shore, forming sea beaches. Let us now look into the work of the wind. Wind is an active agent of erosion and deposition in the desert. Okay, and we'll study about these landforms which are found in the desert, sand dunes, loess's, and mushroom rocks. Children, in this picture you can see how the wind is blowing so strongly and swiftly in the desert because there is no vegetation cover, and when it is blowing, what is happening? It is eroding all the sand and silt. It's blowing away. Okay, so erosion is taking place here, and as the wind speed reduces, all that is blown away gets deposited somewhere. So there we see erosional and deposition activities in the desert. Okay, now let's study about it. So in the desert we see formation of sand dunes due to the work of the wind. What happens, when the wind blows strongly, it blows away all the sand. Okay, and as the wind speed reduces, it deposits all the sand in that place. So here we see shifting dunes. Now the first dune, what are dunes? Are mountains of sand. So first dune was here, when the wind blows and it carries over the sand, and finally when it lowers the speed, it deposits all the sand. So then the next mound will be made here. Again the wind blows, it blows away all the sand, the next mound will be made here. Okay, so this was the former position, then it became the present position, and finally when the wind speed becomes very less, finally it is deposited here. So these are called as shifting dunes, or it is also called migration of dunes. So this is one of the landforms which can be seen in the desert due to the action of wind. That is the formation of sand dunes. So we can describe the sand dunes like this. When the wind blows, it lifts and transports sand from one place to another. When the wind stops blowing, the sand falls and gets deposited in a low hill-like structure. Okay, these low hill-like structures of sand are called as sand dunes. Another land formation that we see due to the action of wind is loess. Now what is loess? When the grains of sand are fine and light, they are carried by the wind action over a long distance, and when they deposit there over a large area, then that area is called as loess. Okay, these are very, very fine and light materials of sand, can be carried over a long distance, and when it gets deposited, leads to the formation of loess. So what are loess? When grains of sand that are fine and light, and the wind can carry it over a very, very long distance. When such sand is deposited in a large area, it is called loess, and we find large deposits of loess in China. Another landform that we see in the desert due to the action of wind is the formation of mushroom rocks. Now in the desert, the wind erodes the lower sections of the rock more than the upper section of the rock. So once it erodes the lower section of the rocks, so what happens? It creates a narrow base and a wider top, leading into the formation of mushroom rocks. Okay, so this is due to the action of wind. The wind erodes the lower section of the rock more than the upper section, so it creates a shape like a mushroom. Okay, these are some of the images of the formation of mushroom rocks in a desert. So what are mushroom rocks? So we can describe it in this way. In a desert, when the wind erodes the lower section of the rock more than the upper part, therefore such rocks have a narrow base and a wider top. Such is the shape of a mushroom, like a mushroom. So that is why it is called mushroom rocks. Now let us look into the landforms which are created to the agent of ice or glaciers. Children, now what are glaciers? They are rivers of ice, and then we'll see the erosional and depositional activities of ice. Now what does this ice do? Now ice is very, very sharp. It erodes the landscape like a bulldozer. It scrapes out the mountains, rocks and stones, and exposes the solid rock. It carves out deep hollows. Hollows are created, and when this hollow is created and the ice melts, then this hollow gets filled up with water, which forms a beautiful lake in the mountain. So you see children, this is the lake which has been found due to the erosional activity of the glaciers, and ice, you know, is like a razor. It creates hollows in the rocks, and when this depression is created and when the ice melt, it fills up this hollow and forms a beautiful lake. So children, in this slide you can see the action of ice on rocks. So what you are seeing, see, as the glaciers move, it's creating cracks, it's scraping off the rocks, can you see, and water is seeping into these cracks and making the holes bigger and bigger. So it is the action of plucking and abrasion which takes place due to the movement of these rivers of ice, which are called as glaciers. So this is the erosional activity of the glaciers. Now let us look into one of the depositional activity of the glacier. Now let us look into the depositional features of the glaciers or ice. Now the material which was eroded by the glaciers, so the rocks, big or small, sand, silt, get deposited somewhere, isn't it? So these deposits form glacier moraines. So this is a depositional feature of the glacier or the work of ice. So children, in this video we have learnt about the exogenic forces, forces that act on the surface of the earth. So as you know, the earth's landscape is continuously worn away by the process of erosion and deposition and weathering. Yes, as I told you, weathering is breaking of the rocks on the earth's surface. Then erosion is wearing away of the landscape by different agents like river, wind, sea waves and glaciers, and the eroded material that is carried away and transported by these agents are eventually deposited. So the process of erosion and deposition creates different landforms on the surface of the earth. Now we have seen the agent of river. What kind of landforms we have learned with for the work of the river? It is the formation of waterfalls, meander, oxbow lakes, floodplains, levees and delta. Now the work of wind, we have seen the formation of sand dunes, loess's and mushroom rocks. Sea waves, we have seen the formation of sea caves, sea arches, stacks, stumps, sea cliffs and beaches. And beaches are the depositional activity of the sea wave. Glaciers, we have learned glacier moraines, which has a depositional activity, and erosional activity is the formation of glacier lakes. So this we come to the end of our chapter, our changing earth. Okay, thank you.